Most people were taught to follow the rules with money. Save it, spend it, borrow it, pay interest, hope retirement works out. But what if the rules were written by the very system keeping you stuck? Welcome to Cashflow Legendz, the show where we challenge conventional financial thinking, expose the hidden leaks in your cash flow, and help families and business owners build more control, certainty, and legacy. This show is for educational purposes only, not financial, tax, or legal advice. Hosted by Nate, Brandon, and Brock. Money, cash flow, legacy. Break the rules. Build your legend.
Nate, I am so stoked today to be talking about a topic that may ruffle some feathers or may make you think, what are they really saying? And do I believe this? And that is the goal. Because we have learned that friction is the only way that things can grow. That also includes our thinking. So, Nate, we're going to start with this, and you've got an awesome story recently that's going to touch on this. And I just want you to give a high level here in just a minute, but here's how I help people frame out if what we teach is worth exploring. If you've ever wondered if what you're doing with your money is going to get you to where you want to go, or you keep getting different answers from different people, I want to emphasize something. It's not because you're incapable. It's because you're surrounded by advice that was never designed for you. So, Nate, at a high level yesterday, you had a great conversation with somebody that's, interested in understanding what we teach, reading, becoming your own banker, going through a process. And you asked him just a few questions that helped him decide if he wanted to rethink his thinking. What was that like?
Yeah, it was a great conversation, and yeah, there were some traditional or typical thought processes that were kind of brought into the conversation, and just by asking a few different questions, you could kind of hear that paradigm start to shift a little bit. One of the things that I asked him is, if you become disabled today and you cannot go to work tomorrow to produce an income, how much of your income and for how long do you want that to continue on to you and your family? Well, Brandon, guess what the number one answer is?
Yet to hear it be anything ever but the
It's
same
as
answer.
much as possible for as long as possible, every time. Well, then we take that one step further and say, okay, morbid thought, but let's say something happens to you and you're gone. How much of your income and for how long do you want that to continue on to the people you love and care about? Guess what? It's the same answer.
I'm going to say it again, Nate. How much of your income, if we're thinking worst case, right? And the reality is worst case is going to happen. We just don't know when we're going to pass away. I say all the time, I'm going with Jesus. That's best case. But worst case in the traditional thinking, worst case, if you are no longer here, how much of your income and for how long do you want it to go to your loved ones? Same answer every time. So, Nate, one follow up to that I want everybody listening and to be thinking about as you listen to this whole episode, even write it down. If I were to graduate, as Nelson said, tomorrow, can those things that Nate just asked, will those things be true? Yes, I'll be able to keep income coming to my family the way they're used to for their entire lives. And yes, my entire income will be replaced. If they can't, and you want them to be, this episode's for you.
Yeah, because most people are playing the odds in their financial life that everything's going to work out the way they hope it's going to work out. We talk about this all the time. Hope is not a strategy. And if you're participating in anything where there is levels of hope that are dependent on the outcome that you're looking for, then maybe we should rethink some of those things. Um, and so our philosophy that we talk about so often is we want to play really great defense to give our offense better opportunities. And that idea of hoping that everything's going to work out, what I like to point out to people is, how often does your day work out the way you thought it was going to work out?
Never. Or actually, Nate, this morning I'm journaling and I actually wrote that. I said, I like acronyms, so I think I wrote RUSH. And I put realizing unexpected situations happen all the time.
Hmm.
Rushing and thinking they won't is silly. But we build our entire day around thinking that it's going to go step 1, step 2, step 3. And in a way, that's cool. We're eternally optimist, but that's not real. That's not life. And so let's start here, Nate. What we're going to focus on today is really calling to action opportunities for people to review where they are currently, where they're going, and if it's getting them where they want to go for sure. And if they know why or why not. If you have full clarity that exactly what's going to happen the way you want it to happen is already happening and it's never going to get any better, then this isn't for you. But what we're going to really talk about is you're not just getting bad advice. And we can say this because we have been there. So I'm not saying something that hadn't been experienced. What we're actually doing is attracting the wrong advice, because the environments we spend the most time in are going to be the pieces of advice or the insight that we get, as always. So we're just attracting the wrong advice. So let's start here. Most people don't actually choose their financial strategy, Nate. They inherit it. Where have you seen that and in what ways?
Well, just in either how you were raised in your home, watching what your parents did, or what you were taught at school, um, what you listen to from talking heads out there when it comes to financial concepts and things like that. That is, you're conditioned by your environment at some level, to just go into doing certain things because that's what everybody else is doing. And that's what we've been told our entire lives because, well, I can say our entire lives
Yeah.
because, that whole system of the 401k, came out around the time that we were born. And so that's the only system that we've ever known.
Hey, let's compare two different systems real quick to what the generation before the 401k experienced more often compared to what we experience now. And we're going to keep it a super high level. Before the 401k came into being, most people, over half, kept their wealth in whole life insurance policies. Go do your own research, but I've always seen it be 50+%. They stored their money there because they knew it was the safest place to store it. But most people that had solid jobs also, if they had any type of retirement, they had pensions. Now, all a pension is, the way we like to say it, is a guaranteed income plan. Money's going to keep coming in at the same amount no matter what you do. So whatever you're making now, whether you're able to work or not, that money keeps coming in depending on how long you work for the company. Do your own research, but pensions are almost non-existent now because what in this particular case, qualified plans, 401ks and others allowed corporations to do is it allowed them to shift ownership on their side to their employee. So now, Nate, let's say we talk to 500 people a year. 475 of them don't have a pension plan. They don't have a guaranteed income plan. And that's what they're trying to get to, because the minute that there's a guaranteed income plan, which is still possible, this takes rethinking of our thinking and better questions, the more peace of mind they have and the certainty to do the next things that they want to do in life, right?
Well, you're exactly right. But, the people who received pensions in the past, one of the things that they weren't fighting against the way we fight against today is this headwind of inflation. Now, inflation is a real thing, but if you look back over the last 20 years of how much money has been injected into how much of the increase of the money supply has gone into the economy, that's where prices increase, is when we inject money into the economy. So the increase in the money supply causes our dollars to lose value, which means it um it requires more dollars to do the same job than it did before. That's why when you see real estate prices going up, it is relative to the increase in the money supply is where we see that most. And the same thing with the stock market. If you if you factor in the increase in the money supply to the stock market over the last 20 years, the rate of return that people see on a piece of paper is not the real rate of return, because you're not factoring in the increase in the money supply.
Yep. All right, Nate. So I'm just going to touch on this because it's important. When you say increase in money supply, all Nate's really saying, unless I'm saying something different, Nate, correct me, is money gets printed and put into the environment.
Correct.
We don't control that. If we print money, we go to jail.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the key piece there, is that money is, and I think the statistic roughly is, for my statistic heads out there, is half the national debt's been pushed into the environment or printed into the environment or created in like the last 6-7 years,
Something like that.
roughly.
Yeah.
And even if I was off by 10%, just let that sink in. So instead of staying there, let's talk about what the solution is. So Nelson said, once we know what the problem is, we'll know what to do. And if I could just let everybody hear that, once we know what the problem is, we'll know what to do. Well, there's only a certain way we can figure out what the problem is. And if we have inherited thinking that creates limitations on staying inside of a system to not see the problem, then the system rewards us in our mind for staying in the problem and not recognizing it, because this thing was built for scale, not customization for each individual.
Awareness without action is insanity.
So Nate, I am encouraging comments here for anybody who's like, if it makes hair stand up on the back of your neck and aggravates you, whether you're a financial professional of any kind, whether you have made tons of money in the stock market, we're not saying these things are bad. We're saying awareness of what if we could do what you're doing and it be better, more certain, more controlled, with more liquidity and more peace of mind. That's what we're saying. So go ahead, Nick.
Yeah. Well, speaking of comments, if you enjoy, if you get value from the things that we talk about, please help us out by subscribing, sharing, liking, all those fun things that you get to do on social media. Helps us out.
So we've got people giving advice based on what they were taught, what they sell, or what works for the masses. And this is not abnormal. This is the norm. Yet anybody we talk to, Nate, when we begin to ask them questions, not to compete against traditional advice, but to bring awareness to why they believe what they believe. I'd like you to walk through the question about the 401k conversation yesterday, because our dear friend Paul and Dave, who have an awesome podcast, I'm going blank on the name. What's Dave and Paul's podcast name?
Wealth Warehouse.
Thank you. Wealth Warehouse. They push back on this hard, and they frame it, and we're talking about control or giving over control. And if you give over control, you are saying, I'm okay with certain things for you to do this for me. And what Paul and Dave do a great job of saying is, why wouldn't you want to be in control if you knew how much more advantageous that would be for your family, for your purpose, for your goals? So walk through the 401k conversation yesterday, Nate. The questions you asked, those are important.
Yeah, and the questions that we ask, you can tell that nobody else is really asking these questions, and not forcing people to really think through. And so this particular conversation was someone who had an old 401k, but they were really wanting to get their infinite banking strategy started, and they were trying to figure out, does it make sense to use this? I really don't want to have to deal with the taxes on it and everything like that, because it was a traditional account. And so the first question I asked is, do you think that taxes are going to be higher or lower in the future?
Nate, I got to stop you and re-say this. Everybody listening. His first concern, rightfully so, with the current knowledge and education he had, which was the best that he had so far, was how are taxes going to impact me? And I am scared, not, he didn't say scared to death, but we hear this often. I'm so scared of tax implications that I just want to roll it into something else so I don't get taxed.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Well, and also one of the things that we have to think through is that account that is sitting there right now, is it creating any value in my life right now, or could it create any value in my life right now? So he agreed that he believed taxes would be higher in the future. I think a lot of us would agree on that. And then I asked him, so are you going to have to pay taxes on this money one day? He's like, yes. Okay. Is it fair to say some people believe that by kicking that tax burden down the road in that account, in a way, what we are doing is we're compounding our tax burden for the future? And he was like, yeah, that makes sense. And so what I like to say is anytime we're operating in a pre-tax account, we're effectively creating an unknown debt to the government to be determined by them at a later date. That is a factual statement. You cannot argue with that.
Let's touch on it at a high level. Why? Because do tax laws change? They change all the time. It's what people run on for presidency. I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. And yes, we can vote for who is guiding all of that, but we don't control that on a day-to-day level. So what Nate's saying is you have to decide, you have to take ownership of what do I believe is going to happen. And
Yeah, and let me say this. We're not financial advisors.
thank you, Nate. I was going there.
So, and we've never told anybody what to do with any of their investment accounts.
Yep.
But what we find often is by asking questions and having these conversations, people arrive at those conclusions themselves. And at the end of the day, it's their money. They get to do whatever they want with it.
Absolutely. So here's a thought tied to this. And if y'all can tell I'm a little bit fired up, I am, because I think we've been too passive on asking tough questions here. Too passive on going, what do you really think about what you think? Because if we don't want to think about what we think, then we're going to stay where we are. And that's okay. Because that's really what we're talking about is we are either repelling or attracting certain type of conversations or advice or insight or thought-provoking questions. So let's think of it this way, because this is, I can hear all my buddies out there who do things traditionally. Well, you and Brandon, you and Nate are incentivized to give this advice. Let's go back to what Nate just said. We've never told anybody what to do with their money. All we've done is ask them questions. And one of the things I like to say often, and this sounds pompous if you're not with me walking through our process. So this is the first time you've ever heard me. This is not pompous. This is a genuine question. If Nate and I can show you with good questions and you're willing to learn with good thinking or rethinking of your thinking, how to keep $1 million, $2 million, $10 million, $20 million from leaving your life. Said another way, staying in your family's ecosystem, being able to bring value, being able to have certainty and control over, to create things that matter most for your family and stewardship. Do you care if we make the same amount? Now, if you say absolutely I do, then we're not a good fit. If you don't want us to bring value to you first with the questions we ask, and you're more worried about what we get paid after the fact, then we're not a good fit. And that's okay.
Yeah. Something you just said reminded me of something I found out recently. One is we teach strategy. We don't manage anyone's money. So if you pay an insurance premium, that insurance premium does not pass through our hands. It goes directly to the insurance company. Now they pay us a commission for the policies we set up, and we don't shy away from that. You know, that's how we get paid. That's how we make money. But your insurance premiums do not get sent to us personally. They go straight to the insurance company. Like you don't get our address and mail us a check or anything like that.
Cash exchange,
it's all
and
going straight to the insurance company that has 150-year plus track record of making good on every promise they've made.
Nate, in the sense, great point. We get to decide what we repel and what we attract. And one of my favorite things when we're working with our C members, and Nate, I want to come back to that member word here in a minute, just because if somebody hears that, that kind of throws people off. One of our favorite things that we get to do when working with our ULC members, those are people who have decided to implement the strategy that uses whole life insurance under the guise and the premise and the foundation of becoming your own banker, Nelson Nash's infinite banking concept, is they start getting access to different thinking, and it starts creating this snowball effect of, I realize I get to decide what I learn, who I hang around, what questions I ask. And even if I don't do all of this, I really enjoy having better choices and being in control. So Nate, you were saying to the same person, we say member, shout out to Trent Fortner, who we've done a ton of coaching with. Membership has privileges. And inside our ecosystem, Nate, I'm going to pass it to you. We focus on certain things, really only one thing, but it's allowed us to have relationships that allow membership to connect you to those new potential opportunities.
Yep. I mean, our tagline is we want to teach you how to keep more of the money that you make so you can earn more on what you keep with as much certainty over your lifetime. So all the things that we're focused on internally is how can we create new levels of value to our members that give them better opportunities to keep more of their money? Because infinite banking is a great way to keep more of your money, but there's even things outside of infinite banking that can allow you to keep more of your cash flow. And so we are experts in the infinite banking concept, centered around whole life insurance. We don't want to be experts in anything else. So we build relationships with people who are experts in those other areas that can come alongside people and teach them the way we teach from that perspective of it's going to be education first, making sure you know what it is and what it's not. Education before implementation.
Yeah, Nate, we had a couple recently who just began paying premiums and starting their IBC system. And they said, and this was the greatest compliment to us, and this is a compliment to our mentors, Mike and Chris and Trent and Brock and all the things that we get to do together. They said, the reason that we feel at peace with taking this step and doing this is because we understand why we're doing it and because you have not one time rushed us to move money. You've just asked question and met us where we are and let us marinate on it and do it again. Because a lot of times when we meet with people, Nate, we send them back to do growth work. And that tells us if they're ready to start attracting different mindsets. You and I get in conversations daily that I chuckle and go, Lord, you're so good to me, because 10 years ago, I couldn't have, if you would have put me in that room, I'd have been a fish out of water. And I'd have probably left because I was so uncomfortable with hearing what they were saying and going, this is not true. So we find what we're looking for. And Nate, I've yet to meet anybody in our process that doesn't want more peace of mind, more certainty, more control, more liquidity, more efficiency, and more opportunity to be good stewards of the income they're earning, no matter how they are, flowing into their lives and their kids' lives and their families' lives and their businesses' life. We've yet to find one. So
yeah, I think it's eye-opening for people whenever you show them, hey, these components of economic value, we can actually increase and promote these through the strategies that we do together, because those are not often things that are spoken of traditionally. I mean, like the typical household is like, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to contribute to my retirement plan and hope it's going to be something one day. I'm going to try to save what I can save. I mean, that's the gist of it.
So Nate, let's take your conversation yesterday. You asked great questions. And once did you say you have to do this or you should do that? So that's a difference between education and dictation. Okay. Now we have to decide if we want to be educated, because education requires time, energy, investing in ourselves, getting in conversations that are different. But then you also had a conversation with him, and we'll stay high level, where when he said, yes, he said, based off Nate's questions, yes, I think taxes are going to go up. And he said, yes, it makes sense. I'd rather not pay taxes on the harvest. I'd rather pay on the seed. And then he said, well, if there were a way to gain control of those dollars earlier and be able to get rid of that tax burden now where it doesn't compound on me in a way that was most efficient, I'd be willing to explore that. So now it's no more 401ks right, whole life insurance is wrong. It's one may give me more of this, one may give me more of that. It's this has rules I like, this has rules I don't like. And so there's not a competition of, as our dear friend, I'll go and blank on his name, but he always reemphasizes Nelson's, Cal Fuller. He always reemphasizes Nelson's message. Infinite banking is not an investment strategy. Over and over and over again. It is not
Yeah.
401k versus whole life.
It kind of like, I had this picture as you said that of like, let's say you have two friends, okay? And you have one that you hope will answer the phone, and you have another one that you can count on answering the phone. You have one that you hope would come pick you up off the side of the road if you had a flat tire. You have one that you can count on picking you up if you have a flat tire. And the picture that I had was like the 401k in that example. You can hope that that's going to be something one day, or you can participate in something that you can count on
Mm.
that has a predictable outcome.
That's good, Nate. So, key piece, everybody listening, if you participate in any traditional financial advice, we are not saying it's wrong. It's with good questioning, almost always from our experience, incomplete, and not answering the real questions that you want to ask. Because the real questions you want to ask that we find daily are focus more on the life we live present day and that we're going to get to live and experience as we age. That's it. There's no, I mean, it almost always comes down to that. You'll hear financial freedom ballyhooed around and talked about. You'll hear debt free. You'll hear passive income. But where it really comes down to is I want to live this life this way intentionally. And right now, I feel like life's happening to me more often than who I am is happening to it. And when we realize that, then we realize, oh, 401k is not wrong. Mutual funds aren't wrong. The banking system's not wrong. They are just designed in ways that let you take control, give up control. That's it.
Yeah, and going back to something we were talking about earlier, just reminded me, I think this is an important point, and I talk about this a lot, is the older we get, the more certainty we need, not less. And so whatever we're doing with our money, if it's creating some level of uncertainty for the future, then we might want to ask, why are we doing that thing? Because the older we get, the younger we are, the more opportunity we have to create and things like that.
Yep.
But the older we get, we need to have more predictability and things like that. That's why typically in your early years, like if you're working with a financial advisor, they're going to have you in some growth stock stuff, right? Yep. But then once you get into the later years, they switch you over into more conservative type things.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's a good statement to be reminded of, Nate. We're talking about repelling and attracting. This is relevant in any area of our life, right? Health, wealth, finance, fitness, fellowship, friendship. Where we grow or don't grow is relevant to our environment. You can't take certain trees and plant them in certain soil and expect them to grow. There has to be the right environment for the right tree. So what kind of tree do you want to be in this example? So when we think about this, we have to ask these questions that help us become aware, Nate, and help us go, how do I shift in my thinking? Or do I want to? And it really comes down to this. Every decision that you make with your finances is gaining more certainty and control, kicking it down the road, or giving it away. That's it. It's not really complicated. It's ridiculously simple. And I can say that 8 years in now, but when I said that early on, I didn't believe it as much as I do now. It really is simple. So first thing we have to ask, Nate, and this is from one of our mentors also, if what we thought to be true weren't, how soon will we want to know? And that's in anything in life. If Nate, I believe that drinking Topo Chico was really, really good for me because you and I love Topo Chicos. And then you found out through lots of time, energy, effort, research that Topo Chico was the worst thing that we could be drinking for whatever reason.
That's actually ironic because I don't drink them anymore because I did find out some stuff that I didn't like about them.
Well, if you find that out, you're going to tell me at some point, right? Or you're not. And then I'm going to go, why didn't you tell me? So why hadn't you told me? Did you forget? You know what I'm saying? That conversation is, why wouldn't you make me aware of that? So
yeah, it was actually fairly recently.
Okay.
I actually haven't investigated exactly why it's bad, but um, it was
Well,
it was some kind of video that was out there. It was like, hey, did you know that it had this, this, and this in it or whatever? And I was like, no, I didn't, but I don't really know what that means. But I just kind of put it on pause for a little while.
there you go. So Nate, there's a distinct difference in the conversations we have nowadays. There's conversations to grow where nobody has got it figured out. And they're always willing to rethink their thinking and have pushback because that is friction that creates growth. Or there's conversations you come into, and we have very few of these anymore, where it's like, I'm right, you're wrong. Because like you just said, you put a pause on it, Nate, because you haven't done enough research to decide what bad is. Because what bad is to you may not be what bad is to me. But if we're both aware of it, we can have a full educated decision on, well, I'm willing to take that chance because I
I'll
really
get
like
back to you
Topo
on that.
Chico.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll get back to you on it.
So, Nate, as we've been thinking through this, here's what keeps coming back to me daily, like in our conversations. Most people are not stuck financially. I'm going to say that again. Most people are not stuck financially. And this reminds me of many of Nelson's words and comments and quotes. They're stuck thinking like everyone else. They're stuck thinking like everyone else. And if you don't think that thinking is getting you where you want to go, or you're not sure, or like Nate said earlier, hope is involved in the strategy. I sure hope I have enough when I retire. Then why wouldn't we look at our advice, our patterns, and our results and go, it might be worth reevaluating that. And I know it's going to be clunky, and I know it's going to feel uncomfortable, and I know it may make me sweat a little bit, but what's the worst thing that could happen? I learned something new, or I confirm what I already believe unequivocally is true, and I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. What's the worst thing that could happen, Nate?
You learned something new.
You learn something new. So this has been about repelling and attracting, and I think it's important to emphasize, Nate, this is not just about money at all. This is about environment and who you spend time having conversations with and what kind of questions they're asking. Nate, there's a saying, you're always really, really good at these kind of sayings. And I think our buddy Wes Howard said it a while back, but basically said, be around tables that talk about ideas and thought processes, not people or problems. And if there is a problem, how do we solve it? How do we bring our strengths together to make it better? And I think that's what you and I love about what we get to do that we think is a privilege, that we believe we should be phenomenal stewards of. And when we forget that, we get reminded because we have great mentors in our life. Is this reality that there's got to be a shift? We got to stop just getting high off of consuming advice and start becoming the creator of our own kind of financial future. Any final thoughts, Nate, that jump out to you?
No, I think, when it comes to repelling or attracting, being that we built our business early on social media, we've had the opportunity to attract people who were really in line with who we are. And so if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, hey, I really like these guys, we might be in alignment with one another. You might need to reach out to us and see if we would be a good fit in what you're trying to do. The goal anytime we're meeting with someone is how can we improve upon what they're already doing.
That's good, Nate.
And if that turns into an infinite banking strategy, that's great. But even if it doesn't, we want to make sure that your cash flow is in alignment with your values and the things that you're working towards, the things that you love.
Yeah. So a reminder for everybody listening, we don't just automatically get what we want financially. We get what environment we're in, and it creates what we say we want. So if the result of what we're getting is different than the environment we're in, then the environment could be changed to create a different result. Have a blessed one.
Thanks for listening to Cashflow Legendz. If this episode helped you think differently, subscribe to the show and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And when you're ready to start building your own cash flow system, schedule a clarity call with Nate using the link in the description. Money, cash flow, legacy, break the rules. Build your legend.